is Darren Moore, who's been with me on every show I've had so far. I've met Darren through Facebook, believe it or not, on his website when he was talking about Russell Kirk, who I was a student of back in the olden days, and Darren knows just about everything about everything. So I always find him to be a fascinating conversationalist and an excellent guest on the show. We were thinking, what should we talk about this week, and decided on the Middle East. And since the show is, we can't devote a whole hour to it. On the Middle East, we could devote, Pete, a whole year on it because it's such a complex issue. We're going to try to stick to bullet points. The general problem in the Middle East is, number one, it's impossible to figure out what's going on. There are religious hatreds, there's political complications, and the United States and Britain and all the West can't seem to make up their mind which alliances they want to establish. So it seems every decade or 2 decades, everything is upside down. So, Darren.
Good morning, Jay.
Thanks for joining us again. I'm delighted to have you. So you've been thinking about this whole Middle Eastern thing. What should normal, sane people think when they look at the extraordinary contradictions and complexities of that whole thing?
Well, that's a great question. One thing's for sure, that the Muslim uprising and unrest, what might be called the Muslim Spring or a Muslim awakening that we've seen here recently, has certainly nothing to do with the fact that there is a new, stable, self-ruling republic in the center of the Middle East, Iraq, now, is there, Jay?
I guess not.
You know, it's funny, the progressives, they screamed that we were fighting that war for oil. So I guess we lost that because, gas is now $4 plus a gallon.
Yeah. So the situation, the way I look at it, after 9/11, my son Sean, said to me, he was about 12 years old, he said, "Dad, what's going on over there?" Because he didn't understand it, and I couldn't think of a short way to describe it. I said, "Sean, let's do this. Let's get on the internet and try to trace this conflict all the way back." And we stopped pretty much at the bombing of the King David Hotel in I think it was 47 or 48. Huh. And as you go forward, it just gets more and more complex. So it's hard to pick winners and losers. And it seems right now the United States can't quite figure out what's going to happen to Gaddafi, and we get mixed signals from our president.
Yep. Well, it's very complicated. It's incredibly confusing, totally complex, and we're in a precarious corner of the world. But what is most confusing is how Obama made his bones attacking the Bush doctrine during his campaign, and then he entered the Oval Office and he continued all of it. In fact, he doubled down in Afghanistan. Yeah. And so in some ways he has perpetuated exactly the Bush doctrine. But on the other hand, he's coddling our enemies and condemning our allies. I mean, you think about how he audaciously, arrogantly, aggressively pushed our most liberal ally in Egypt, Hosni Mubarak, out the door when people were simply peacefully protesting in the streets for a few weeks. But yet we stay silent, passive, impotent, permissive towards Tehran, which is the real obstacle to lasting peace. They are the top terrorist state. And so it's more than just complexity. It's more than contradictions and paradoxes. Some of it is just outright hypocrisy.
Yeah. Now, the Bush doctrine Bush's position was that the United States should support countries or peoples that are trying to establish democracies?
Well, I would say that's an oversimplification of the Bush doctrine. I think America's doctrine has always been, although we have always paid attention to beware foreign entanglements, that, I mean, you look back to the things that Reagan said was that, our job is to nourish and help defend these fledgling freedoms wherever they exist in the world, but without being the world's police force. And so, it's very interesting how, going back to the Bush doctrine, obviously, it began with the idea of attacking and indeed an interventionist, a preemptive attack on what we consider to be our most dangerous enemies. However, I mean, it gets very complex from there, Jay, because then we look at how we are operating with impunity in Pakistan, a Muslim nuclear-armed nation, yet in a nation like Iran that is trying to develop nuclear weapons, we're hardly doing anything at all. And when we see its puppet in Syria, the President Abbas there is attacking his people very similarly to the way that Gaddafi was attacking his people. And so Obama, by trying to be, I mean, it's interesting when you think about it, this is the most jingoistic, aggressive, warmongering Nobel Peace Prize winner we have ever seen. And so when you look at how he has inserted us into the middle of a civil war in a tin pan dictatorship like Gaddafi, yet when we look at some of these real problems from Syria and Iran, we remain silent. It's very confusing.
It's just beyond comprehension. I recall when Carter started being supportive of those who were opposed to the Shah of Iran, it seemed a complete turnabout from our previous policies, and people warned that when you get rid of the Shah, Jimmy Carter, you're going to introduce a whole new world. And just shortly after that, the Khomeini, the Ayatollah, was killing hundreds of people, just taking lines of people up and just putting them against a wall and shooting them. And now wasn't there news out of Egypt that things are turning quite bad?
Yeah, Egypt's having another uprising today. Syria's got unrest being quelled everywhere. The Iranian situation is very interesting because you look at what has happened since the Islamic Revolution there. Yeah. In the last 30 years, 70% of their population was born since then, and yet during those same 30 years, we've seen the rise of Japan. Former enemies have become allies. We're getting along and having this great partnership with India, and yet Iran continues to isolate itself through this oligarchy, this theocracy, that really has its stated intention is not only the destruction of Israel, our allies, but also the conquest of the entire Islamic world. So when we look at what Iran's rhetoric is and what their actions have been, certainly, the world's top terrorist state is something that we need to be dealing with, and yet here we are getting into the middle of a civil war in a backwards Libya. It's funny you were talking about flip-flopping. Shoot, we got involved so fast in that war in Libya that I never even had the opportunity to be against that war before I was for it. Yeah. Where is, we talk about hypocrisy, where is the anti-war left? Where's Code Pink? I may actually want to join them in protest against the Libyan war, but they're nowhere to be found, are they?
Darren, we're going to pick this up later.
I never did get in the point about how the Muslim world likes to treat the West and America in particular as our scapegoats, as the great Satan, and they attack us for what we do with our modernization, what we do with our materialism and our immorality. They hate all of that. In fact, some Americans hate that as well. But what is interesting is, although they want to make us out to be the great Satan, they want to keep us as their great customer. And so, in some respects, I think we should try to at least give them, some of what they want. And I think that means that we need to drill here for our own oil, because, first of all, we need it, we have it, and I'm sick of paying our enemies for it. So, although I do not suffer from the delusion that if we simply avoid all confrontation with our enemies, they will stop their evil ways and learn to love us. I understand that we should beware foreign entanglements. That doesn't mean we should avoid them at all cost. And I understand that until we are energy independent, that we're likely going to have a prudent and entangled foreign policy in that region of the world. But also, we've got to be looking hopefully to the future in the region because of this Arab Spring, this Arab uprising, this Arab awakening that we're seeing, where the people of that world are looking to oust whether it be a dictator or oligarchy, The people of the Muslim world are looking for a new way, and we ought to welcome this to some extent, but we also ought to worry that, it's the same difference between the American Revolution and the French Revolution. The American Revolution brought an order, a civilized order, a peaceful order, an opportunity for peace and prosperity to be nurtured and to grow. Whereas with the French Revolution, what ended up happening is those revolutions essentially were designed to tear down all existing institutions. And so we have yet to see what is going to be the result of this Muslim awakening. And each state is different. No doubt the people in Yemen that are uprising have different things in mind than do the Syrians that are uprising. And you look at the situation in Lebanon ever since the assassination of Pierre Gamaliel and the Cedar Revolution that has taken place there, often to very little attention of the mainstream media. We've seen we've seen Hezbollah come in and really disrupt and turn that freedom-loving nation, for the most part, inside out, and has Iran through Hezbollah has attempted to make Lebanon like they have made Syria, essentially a puppet of theocracy, of this oligarchy being run by the mullahs and the ayatollah out of Tehran. So we have treachery is everywhere, and what is most important at this point, I believe, is although Sun Tzu will teach us that all warfare is based on deception, I think it is very important that America has a clear voice. And therefore, I'm really glad that President Obama is going to tell us next week what's on his mind this week. And on Thursday's big speech is going to lay out how we're going to solve all the problems in the region. Surely, everything will get better after another speech from our dear president. I think I hit all the key points. There's one thing that we need to consider here, if I'm to go one step further, is that there is a clash of the civilizations that is taking place here. The clash of the civilizations between the Muslim world and the West is essentially a battle, a clash over the idea of which is the highest political value that will triumph. In the West, the highest political value is freedom. In the Muslim world, the highest political value is virtue. Now, don't be confused by that. What we think are virtues may not be what the Muslim world thinks are virtue, but piety, obedience, submission and submission to normative, virtuous forms are what the Muslim world feels are its highest political value. And they will employ, as we've seen through the Islamists, terrible means to try to affect that virtue. The Mutawa'in, the militant arm of the Wahhabist movement in Saudi Arabia, are ruthless as they distribute virtue at the long arm of the sword of their justice. So what you have here is two cultures, two civilizations that are clashing over. The West is, our main political value is freedom. Their main political value is virtue. Maybe not the virtue that we would like. They don't treat their women right. They don't have freedoms, and it's extremely oppressive. Maybe in many ways back-assward. However, they see our lack of virtue as a reason, as a justification for all of their terroristic means. And so I'm not saying that we should in any way get rid of our liberties, get rid of our freedoms. However, we need to understand that many of the same reasons why they hate our culture are the same reasons why many of us conservatives are very concerned about the direction America is taking. Yes, we need to be more than just this materialistic, immoral society that projects itself to the world through 2.5 Men, or this Hollywood decadence. And an old Burkean, old Kirkian like myself is going to remind America that in order for us to be lovable, our country must be lovely. And so it's dependent on all of us to do what we can to light a candle in our corner of the world to help improve our little platoon of life. And so therefore we can not only have the freedom and liberty that our Western civilization brings, but also so that it can be virtuous and be lovely. And so that way this clash of civilizations is lessened, and perhaps in years to come we can have the same type of partnership and peace with the Muslim world that we have with the Hindus or the Buddhists, the Jews, and of course the rest of the Christian world as well. So it's spring, it's a new day, and let's hope that as everything shakes out in the Muslim world, that it is a movement towards not only virtue but also freedom. And let's hope that these countries, in the ashes of their revolution, that they are able to set up a government, at least of the one, the many, and the few, an ordered government, a balanced government that can provide for freedom and provide for virtue as well. So here's hoping.